Rudeus and Sylphie's wedding wasn't so much about Rudeus and Sylphie, but was instead an opportunity to highlight all the people around them. It's hard to appreciate a cast as big as this, but when they're all in the same room and even interacting with each other, you best believe we're gonna get some interesting conversations out of them. That's what a majority of the cut content for this episode is, and as you'll soon see, it does well to develop a lot of the side characters. So whether it be Luke hitting on Nanahoshi or Ariel presenting her gifts, the wedding reception was a rare opportunity to see more from everyone else. Scenes that unfortunately didn't make it into the anime, but ones I think you'll definitely appreciate. Before we get started though, if you've ever watched The Ancient Magus Bride like I'm sure plenty of you have, you're definitely gonna want to see this. On April 27th, 10 AM Eastern, my partners over at Figurama are releasing this amazing Elias and Chise statue. A 1/7 scale work of art complete with multiple portraits, several Easter eggs, and swappable components. For those familiar with the anime, you'll recognize Chise's bracelet serving as the base, the iconic fairies of the Cottonfly and Salamander, then even Jade, Ariel, and Silky's ribbon. You can also swap out Elias's staff for his beautifully crafted phoenix ring and switch up Chise's hands with multiple others. So this was clearly put together by people who love the series, and it certainly shows in both the design and craftsmanship. I mean, it even has glow-in-the-dark vines and an LED-equipped crystal poppy flower. So, if you want to add this to your collection, then be sure to join the wishlist using the link down in the description. You're definitely going to want to know as soon as it comes out because elite Figamis like this have sold out super quick in the past. Like, their Made in Abyss one sold out in 55 minutes last time. So, I highly recommend joining their wishlist, and if you do decide to make the purchase on April 27th, be sure to use this code for $35 off. You can also come compete for a chance to win one on my stream this Sunday. There'll be more info on that towards the end of the video. But anyway, episode 38, Wedding Reception, covering chapters 5 to 7 from volume 10 of the light novel. The first and most important thing that needs to be mentioned is exactly what it is Rudy decided to do with the secret room down in the basement. Last episode I mentioned it wasn't specified, but after reading a little more, it was confirmed to be a shrine. A private room home to a secret altar, the contents of which were the idols Rudy went and prayed to every day. It was kept behind a door Rudy ensured was soundproof, so no matter how many times he went in or out, no one would suspect there was something else down in the basement. Now, it was a week after all these renovations had been completed that Rudy and Sylphie were able to spend some quality time together. Normally Sylphie wouldn't have had time to do any of this, but after getting a week off thanks to Ariel, the two would spend all week together preparing for their upcoming reception. It was a week Rudy had hoped would be filled with all sorts of romantic endeavors, but was instead non-stop work as arrangement after arrangement had to be made. Some of the concerns that weren't mentioned in the anime was the way certain people would react when seeing others, the seating order since there was a mix of people from royalty to adventurers, then of course the possibility that no one would even show up. This last one stemmed from a fear he gained from an anime, and it was a reference to this scene from Kyojin no Hoshi. Basically, the main character put all this work into setting up a Christmas party, but when the time came, no one he invited showed up. It's not really all that important, but a reference like this once again highlights that generational gap between him and Nanahoshi. We're shown yet again through media the type of content Rudy grew up with. As for the other concerns, consideration needed to be given for how certain people may interact with each other. Like, with Linnea and Persena having bad blood with Ariel, who knows how they would react when they see her again? And knowing exactly how Ariel was, it's likely she would use this reception as her own personal networking event. There was no way she would miss an opportunity to make acquaintance with the other special students. Seating was a whole nother issue on its own because when your guests are royalty, nobility, adventurers, and slaves, you couldn't possibly seat them in order of status properly, especially if you wanted to keep groups like Zanaba and Julie together. So, rather than make the mistake of seating someone with lower status ahead of someone with higher status, Rudy instead just opted for no seating at all. It was the best way to circumvent the whole issue with status. It's also the reason he instructed everyone to come in uniform, since while there was definitely a gap in status, it wouldn't be as apparent if everyone came dressed the same. They had even went and bought one for Julie. This is just one of the many things they left out on Julie's end, and as you'll soon see, they're all brief scenes of her acting cute. Switching back to the preparations first though, although the anime doesn't make it visible with Rudy's design, shopping for a new robe was actually quite essential for him. This is the same robe he's been traveling with ever since the Demon Continent, and while Sylphie herself didn't care that it was in tatters, the people Rudy associated with likely did. So it wasn't so much Sylphie wanting to make Rudy look less disheveled, but rather a necessity for if he wanted to be part of Ariel's camp now. Sylphie would maintain her Fitz identity as she walked into the store, and this would be the reason why the shop owner had recognized her. It was a place Ariel and Luke came to as regulars, and that made it clear it was a shop that catered to Asuran royalty. Luke actually came here more than Ariel did, and every time he did, there would always be a different girl with him. Now, there was actually purpose behind each of these robes, and both catered to the elemental specialties Rudy had mentioned earlier. For water, this was made from the hide of rainforest lizard, and that was a material that was supposed to be highly water resistant. For earth, this was made from the hide of Begarit's great earthworms, and they were supposedly durable in sandstorms. The reason Rudy decided not to take either, though, was because his experience with rainforest lizards proved they weren't that resistant to water at all, and the camo of the desert one just seemed out of place here. Had it been something a bit more snow-like, then this second robe was a purchase he would have made for sure. As for the last, this was a more subdued design typically chosen by older people. It was made from the hide of the D-rank lucky rat, and this was a superior species to that of the mucky rat. Only once had Rudy ever come across either of these monsters, but it was when he did that he was terrified of them. Something about a horde of 20-inch rats just didn't sit well with him, especially when the lucky rat was even bigger than that. Luckily, their skin boasted resistance to acid and poison, so in general the robe was quite the useful one. You just had to look past the price tag making it equivalent to a house in the demon continent, then after that the robe really was rather nice for him. So the measurements for that would then be taken, and the robe handcrafted and delivered within the next 3 days. The two would then proceed with the rest of their shopping, and it's here they would have that conversation about Rudy not thinking he was good enough for her. Of course, Sylphie reassured him that he was, but if there was anything he could improve on, it would be his confidence. You see, Sylphie believed Rudy could be a bit too submissive sometimes, so in an effort to make him less, she straight up told him to be more assertive. It's an important line that I think highlights how it is Sylphie sees Rudy right now. Though she always pictures him on this unattainable pedestal, he's not a perfect entity she's afraid to criticize. No, he's simply the person she wants to support the most in life. This would then bring us to the bath scene, and while there was a whole section on Rudy teaching Sylphie how to bathe properly, there wasn't anything too important in between all that. It would simply remind them of how it was the first time they met, and the two would reminisce on how they ended up together. Rudy would also show his appreciation for bathing in general, since while he never really got around to it in his past life, he found doing it now was actually quite relaxing. Sylphie would also take the occasional peek at Rudy, and the rest was Rudy practicing self-control. Now, it's when we get to the wedding reception a few days after that there were a whole bunch of interactions cut which developed the side characters. These brief yet interesting moments which I found added charm to a lot of them. The first came from Linnea and Persenna, and it was through their early arrival 2 hours before the event was even scheduled to start. You see, for them this was a display of loyalty. As it is in beastfolk culture, when attending a wedding it was customary to go hunting the morning of, make a kill, then offer said kill as the gift. The earlier one went hunting, made their kill, then returned with it, were all measures of respect for the person who invited them. So for Linnea and Persenna to show up 2 hours early, all with this massive boar they had hunted just this morning, well, that was a tremendous display of their loyalty. It was them showing Rudy how much they truly respected him. It was 1 hour later that Zanaba and Julie would arrive, then 30 minutes after Ariel and her attendants. They were introduced as Elmoy Bluewolf and Cleanne Elrond, and the two were surprisingly close to Sylphie despite us never having seen them before. In fact, when everyone was conversing later on in the party, Rudy could actually spot Elmoy in tears as she spoke about how happy she was for Sylphie. It was clear she and Cleanne really cared for her, especially when you remember the three probably fought numerous battles together. Rudy would then make a joke about people having last names combining a color and an animal, then Ariel would step forward and present the gifts she'd brought. The first was an aphrodisiac Rudy was more than familiar with, then the next was a wooden dildo for in case Rudy couldn't do his job anymore. They were both presented in the most serious manner you could imagine, and that was because in Asura stuff like that was completely normal. For a nation as promiscuous as theirs, it makes sense for gifts like these to be part of their culture. It's actually something that I briefly talked about back in my episode 0 cut content from almost a year ago. In any case, Rudy would guide Ariel into the common area where a bit of tension would build between her and the Beast Girls. Obviously neither were gonna start a fight, but Rudy made sure by giving Linnea and Persenna the look. He would even glance at Zanaba in order to tell him to keep those two in check, but Zanaba instead took that as an invitation to introduce himself. A display of refined social skills which reminded Rudy that he too was royalty. Of course, he didn't go very long without praising Rudy, but that was par for the course when it came to any conversation with him. It was Cliff, AniNews, and Nanahoshi who showed up last, and to Rudy's surprise they had all arrived together. Nanahoshi didn't actually walk with them, but she was hovering outside the gates looking all flustered. Naturally, AniNews urged her to come with them, and that was how the three ended up showing up together. It was when Cliff heard that Nanahoshi was Silent 7th Star that he would immediately go and introduce himself. For some reason, he wanted to know whether she had heard of him. Probably to inflate his ego, and that's exactly what had happened when she responded saying she did. Nanahoshi would then go and speak to Rudy, and she would basically confirm that he was serious. If there was any doubt in him not wanting to go back to Earth, then it was all pretty much gone with this marriage here. AniNews and Cliff would then head straight into the common area, and the two wouldn't hesitate to converse with anyone. Despite AniNews' status being just above that of Julie's, it was clear that such a thing meant nothing to her. She had no problem interacting with anyone whatever way she wanted, leading Rudy to think perhaps the notion of rank meant nothing to elves. The same couldn't be said for Cliff though, since while I'm sure he was aware of what status meant to everyone, he had no problem stifling the mood preaching about how great he was. Of course, AniNews made it a bit more bearable, but just like Xanaba and his praise for Rudy, this too was just part of who he was as a person, even if it did come off as direct rather than endearing. Nanahoshi was a lot more social than you may think, since while the anime showed her tucked away in the corner, she did make conversation whenever someone approached her. It wasn't anything deep or important, but she wasn't just this wallflower actively avoiding everyone, especially later on when Julie and Bodygotti join her. Since we're on the topic of Bodygotti now, his arrival was standard behavior for pretty much every Demon King. As it is according to their culture, whenever a Demon King attends a party, they must always wait for the perfect moment to astonish and disrupt. It was a silly custom created by Kashirika herself, one she made up completely on a whim, yet one Bodygotti still followed despite knowing it was ridiculous. In the novel, he had come through the back door like some kind of robber, while in the manga he straight up came through the chimney like he was Santa Claus. Obviously that's a little ridiculous for someone his size, but it's definitely hilarious to see him crawling out like this. Now, it was after the speech and a little more socialization that a few minor interactions were omitted from the after party. Julie would sit next to Nanahoshi and eat chips without saying anything, then Bodygotti would come up after and join both of them. Whether it was because Bodygotti was intimidating or she just wanted to protect her chips, out of pure instinct Nanahoshi would pull out one of her rings. She was clearly in a panic as this massive figure approached her. Bodygotti wasn't going to do anything, but he did mess up her hair as he casually played around with both of them. This would spur Nanahoshi to leave and go talk to Rudy, which in turn brings us to that important question Sylphie had asked to her. An interesting comment I'm surprised they didn't show along with it was another line from Sylphie stating that she knew Nanahoshi wasn't from here. The reason I say I'm surprised is because the inclusion of it adds a whole nother layer to this. You see, if Sylphie knows Nanahoshi's from a different world, then her initial question means she suspects Rudy might be from one too. This is the first time such a topic has ever been mentioned by someone close to him, so it leads to a perspective of Rudy that we haven't yet seen before. One in which we get to see how he treats the idea of other people knowing he's, well, different. So, after Sylphie had asked the question of what she meant, Nanahoshi would glance at Rudy as if to ask what to do. She had left it entirely up to him since for her such a detail wasn't hers to tell. Rudy's response may not be what you expect since for him he honestly didn't care what Nanahoshi said. Whether she told the truth or just brushed it off, the fact he was isekai'd wasn't something he was trying to hide from Sylphie. He thought the topic would be a bit difficult to explain, but her knowing it wasn't that big of a deal for him. If anything, it's more important for us as the viewer since the reveal of such knowledge suggests she already suspects it. At the very least, it presents the concept of being isekai'd as common knowledge. Well, as it would seem for Nanahoshi's case anyway. This brings us now to AniNews and Sylphie, which was done surprisingly well considering the amount of information packed within. The majority of it was captured almost perfectly, but for a bit more context you should definitely check out the manga. An entire side chapter was dedicated to explaining it. Well, at least hinting towards it since the only hint before that was the one from episode 4. So, it was in chapter 79.5 that Alamoy had gone and done an investigation on Rudy and AniNews. It was from this that Sylphie first heard she was part of the Black Wolf Fang, and it was that revelation which made her remember a conversation she once had. The conversation where her father first spoke about her grandmother. So, what the anime and novel portrayed as Sylphie simply telling Alina Lise was instead shown as a flashback between her and Laws. What makes this so interesting is that in addition to all the stuff about how Alina Lise was a troublemaker, we also get to see how it was Laws found out about her through Paul. Before that, he didn't like Alina Lise too much either, but after hearing how she was while she traveled with Paul, such amazing stories made him think that perhaps she changed a bit. The person Paul described was far different from the outcast everyone else did. It was a different perspective that made Laws think perhaps her and Sylphie should meet one day. It was this conversation which stuck with Sylphie over the years, and that would be the reason why she was even aware of Alina Lise. So the reception would take a bit of a somber turn here, but with Bodygotti constantly laughing in the background, he alone would keep the mood light. Not once did he come up to congratulate Rudy or Sylphie, but his lively presence was something Rudy was grateful for. Now, it was once people started to leave that the only other notable interaction was between Nanahoshi and Luke. As you'd expect from someone as womanizing as him, it was only natural for him to try and hit on Nanahoshi at least once that day. He was feigning interest in topics he thought she might be passionate about, but no attempt at conversation could dissuade his annoying presence. So the more Luke spoke, the more Nanahoshi got annoyed, and eventually she would have to run to the bathroom just to escape him. That's when she figured it was time to leave, and the rest was pretty much as we saw. This brings us now to the duel between Luke and Rudy, but that's something that I feel is worthy of its own video. It's one I actually plan to release tomorrow, so be sure to keep your eye out for that one. Now, don't forget the big giveaway stream is happening this Sunday, so if you want a chance of winning this amazing ancient Magus Bride statue, then be sure to come hang out since you'll actually have to compete for it. There'll be several games testing your anime knowledge. If you just want to pre-order one for yourself though, then be sure to sign up for the wishlist using my link down in the description. Figurama's been a very amazing partner, and we're actually planning something super special in the future. So, if you want to show them love for helping to support me in the giveaways I do, then even just registering your email with them is super helpful. Just click the link, then join the wishlist. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!